G'day, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about how I make the videos I make involving model aircraft, especially the flight videos. A lot of people notice that this channel has some of the best tracking, some of the best flight videos you'll find on YouTube. How do I do that? What are the secrets to my ability to track models so closely, and what kind of gear do I use? How do I go about it? Because I'm someone that was diagnosed with Parkinson's 3 years ago, so I don't have the steadiest hands in the world, so therefore it seems a bit anomalous that I have the steadiest videos on YouTube when it comes to flying model aircraft. Well, today I'm going to talk a bit about the gear I use, a bit about the techniques I use, and this is going to be a series of videos. So first of all, I want to start with my camera. Now this is, I've used a number of cameras over the years. Let's just go back to basics. Any camera is better than no camera, and a lot of people are surprised when I tell them I'm using a camcorder. Yeah, it's a camcorder. Okay, it's a fairly top-end camcorder, and I've always tried to buy the best gear I can afford because, well, you know, this is the cornerstone. Every video I make is reliant on getting reasonably good footage to start with. You can do a lot of other stuff in the editing and so forth, but you do need to start with pretty good video in the first place, and that's what I try to do. Now, when I first started making YouTube videos, I had a Sony analog camcorder. That's going back a long time now. I had tape, 8mm tape. I then moved on to a Panasonic HC-X1500, which was also, it was digital tape. All my SD videos were made with that for many years, and then Sony New Zealand reached out to me and offered me the camera that I'm filming this on, which is the HDR PJ760VE. You can look that up if you like. It's got a gimbaled lens. I've done a video on it before, so if you want to see that, I'll try and find a link somewhere. It'll be up here or in the description. And that was fantastic, especially as I got shakier. The gimbaled lens, to be honest, it is the single best system available, is the gimbaled lens Sony cameras. Now they have the AX53 or something, I think it is, which is a 4K camera. The problem with the Sony camera that I'm filming this on is it's only HD, and I needed to go to 4K. Not because I want to make 4K videos, but because 4K gives me much more scope when I'm editing the videos later, as we'll see in a future video on this channel. So I needed to go to 4K to compensate for my shaky hands, and I thought, well, I'll just buy the next version of the Sony camera that I'm using here. But unfortunately, there's a big gap between 4K camcorders and 4K camcorders that can actually do high frame rates. And by high, I mean 50 frames or 60 frames a second. Most of the affordable camcorders on the market that call themselves 4K are limited to 25 or 30 frames per second. That's just not enough when you're dealing with fast-moving objects like model aircraft. So I didn't buy the Sony. I bought this. This is the Panasonic HC-X1500. That's what it is. It is, apparently they call it to be the lightest 4K high frame rate camcorder on the market, and it is pretty light. That's one of the key things. If you're going to be out there filming all day, you want something that's light, something that doesn't weigh you down. You don't get sore arms. Although I say after a full day's filming, even something this light does tend to get a bit heavy. So weight is crucial. They make another version of this, which is the 2000. It has a handle on the top. I don't need a handle, it's just extra weight, so I got the cheapest version of this. Now this does 4K at 24 frames a second, at 25 frames, 30 frames, 50 or 60 frames per second. And it'll do 120 frames per second in HD, which is great. It does everything I want. And a lot of people say, well, why camcorder? Why not a nice mirrorless camera, a full frame camera? Well, you know, there's plenty of, you know, from Sony and Canon and all these camera manufacturers have these cameras that will do video and stills. Why did you choose a camcorder? Well, the answer is pretty simple. It's because everything I need is right here. I don't need to have other lenses. I don't need to have ND filters. I don't need to change batteries all the time. I don't need to wait for it to cool down after it's filmed for 20 minutes. This does everything in one little package, and it's not the best at anything, but overall it's the best at everything when you sum everything up. For a start, there's a number of things you need if you're going to film small models flying at a distance. One of them is good zoom. Now this has what is it? I think it's up to 24 times optical zoom. 24 times optical zoom. It's equivalent of a camera that goes from 25mm to 600mm in a 35mm format for you camera buffs. So basically it's got a big zoom. It has a big zoom. And that's important because otherwise you're just looking at one little pixel moving around on your screen, especially if you're viewing in a phone. I like to get close-ups of aircraft in the air because that's where they look most spectacular. So this enables me to reach out and drag in the models from quite a distance. That's really important. Now the other thing you need is stabilization. because if you've got a lot of zoom on, it's useless if you're not stabilized. Now this has 5-axis hybrid stabilization, which means it has an optical system where there are optical elements that move to compensate for camera movement, and a digital system which then further stabilizes the picture if the optical can't keep up. So it has a reasonably good stabilization system. To be honest, it's nowhere near as good as the Sony I'm using there. Nothing beats the Sony gimbaled lens, or Boss, or whatever they want to call it. But it's adequate for me. It's adequate because now I'm filming in 4K. I can use my editing tools to stabilize everything just a little bit more and get those beautiful flowing smooth shots that you see on the channel. Now this also has a number of other features, as I mentioned. It has built-in ND filtering. It has 1/4, 16th and 64th ND filtering. So on a very bright day, I can stop it down to avoid all the highs blowing out and so forth. It also has an optical or electronic eyepiece viewfinder, which is absolutely essential. You cannot, don't try recording in the full sun with a camcorder that simply has a fold-out screen, because you won't be able to see anything. The sun is at your back to get the best shots, and these screens, no matter how good, they just wash out in the sun. You cannot see. You need an eyepiece viewer, and that's the bare minimum for any camcorder that you're going to be using. Now the Panasonic one is brilliant. It has a huge battery which is good for 4 hours of continuous filming. You don't have, I bought a spare battery. I've never used it because this lasts me an entire day's filming. And it also has unlimited record time, so it won't shut down after 20 minutes or 30 minutes because it's got too hot. I've been using this in the blazing heat and it just keeps recording. It doesn't complain about temperature. That's something that you don't get with a lot of these fancy full frame and mirrorless cameras. A lot of them are a little bit more fragile when it comes to heat. It has manual focus, manual exposure, and manual zoom ring. So all these things you can control manually. Now, a lot of the time, I leave things pretty much automatic because you can't track manual focus. It's too hard. So I leave the focus on auto, but I do set my shutter time. And I'll talk about that more when it comes to the issue of stabilization. I do use a manually set shutter time. Very important. I don't use the 50% or the 180-degree shutter exposure that's normal. I use a much shorter shutter time than you might think. And I'll tell you why later. Now you'll notice this also has a fluffy dead cat microphone. This is not standard. This is not, the camera itself comes with a built-in microphone, which is, to be honest, decidedly average. Very susceptible to wind noise. And if you're going to be filming outdoors, wind noise can be a real issue. So I got myself a very cheap Boya. I don't know what this one is. I can't even see. What does it say? It's an MM1, Boya BY-MM1. I think it was like 40 bucks. And it's pretty damn good. It cuts most of the wind noise out. It's omnidirectional, so I get sound from all around, people standing beside me and things in front of the camera. It is a little, when you get a lot of wind, it does clip a little. It does have because it doesn't require a battery or anything, so it's got a somewhat limited dynamic range. But if you're going to get one of these cameras, I would say get one of these microphones, because otherwise you may be a little disappointed. That plugs in via a 3mm or 3.5mm jack, standard 3mm jack. If you get the model of this with the handle on the top, it has dual XLR inputs, but I don't need dual XLR inputs. You can hear someone say landed quite perfectly well with a 3mm input jack. Yeah, so pretty much that's it. It has a convenient carrying handle. It does everything I want, although not everything I want particularly well. One thing, it does have some faults. This does have some problems. This camera sometimes irritates the hell out of me. The biggest fault is that somewhere in here there's some kind of bug or something in respect to the way the record button works. Now, when you press the record button, you expect the camera to start recording. And then if it's recording and you press the button again, you expect it to stop. Now, that's not always what happens with this camera. Sometimes when you press to stop recording, it doesn't register the button press. And you keep recording, so you're filming away, you press to stop, and you put the camera down. And what happens then is you get a lot of footage of your legs, which is not a good thing. I don't know, you have to be very, very diligent in checking to make sure that the camera is actually recording when you want it to record, and it's not recording when you don't, by looking at the little red dot on the screen or the viewfinder. Even the little red light here it's not a tally light. It doesn't tell you it's recording. It's just power light. So you've got no way of knowing if it's recording or not unless you actually look at the viewfinder or the LCD. Very annoying. I have wasted so much SD card filming my feet, and I've lost shots, really good shots, because the camera, I think the camera stopped recording. It's pointing at the ground. Something happens. I press record, pull the camera up, and I've actually just stopped it recording. So I'm actually not recording what I'm looking at. That is an intensely irritating fault. It is a fault in the design of this camera, because I've had two of these and they've both done it. So you really have to work around it. It's not a deal breaker, but you really have to be diligent in making sure that it is recording. Because the other thing is, this has no audio cue. Now with my Sony, if I press record, it goes bing. And when I press record again to stop recording, it goes ping pong. So my ears tell me what mode it's in. This makes no noise at all. There is no way to turn on an audio cue to indicate whether it started or stopped recording. Big flaw in my mind. I think they could really do better at Panasonic. They could fix that. Apart from that, there's really not much to grizzle about. It's got an HDMI input, it's got headphones, it's got a DC in if you want to run it off DC. Oh, that's for charging as well, yeah. That's it. It's really all it is, the fold-out LCD, as you would expect. And so that's why I chose a camcorder. Now, when I go to the field, I don't have a box of lenses, I don't have a box of filters, I don't have a whole stack of spare batteries and have to worry that the battery's going to go flat at the wrong time. It is an all-in-one, and that's the real convenience. I'm filming something, a model a long way away, full zoom, and it crashes. I can then pull right out and look at the pilot's face and get his expression. You can't do that with a mirrorless camera because you're going to have a 600mm lens on to get the faraway shots. Then when the plane crashes, you have to unscrew the 600mm lens, put on your 35mm lens, turn around. By that time, the pilot's already wandered off. The convenience of camcorders far outweighs the fact that they have some performance limitations. Those are mainly brought about by the fact that this has a 1/2.3 sensor, I think, or 1/2.5 sensor. Very small sensor. It's the kind of sensor you'd find in a smartphone. So that means that it's not much good in low light, but I don't fly in low light. I don't fly at night. Well, at least I don't film it if I fly at night, so that's not a big issue. The other thing is, in order to get that massive zoom range, equivalent of 600mm on a 35mm camera, in a package this small, you have to sacrifice something. You can only do that with a small sensor. So the small sensor gives me that fantastic zoom range. Also, it increases the depth of field. So basically everything's in focus. You can get bokeh, which is where the background's blurry, makes things stand out. You look at a lot of my shots of pilots and things, the background is quite blurry because if you use the settings properly, you can induce some depth of field. But normally it's not there. It looks like it's filmed on a camcorder, but that's just one of the penalties you pay. It's not such a big deal I think it's more fashion than anything in many cases. So that's the camcorder I use, and that's why I use it. Now this is not a particularly cheap camcorder, of course. I think in the US they're about $1,500 US, a lot of money. I paid $3,000 New Zealand for this because our dollar is worth nothing. But I don't regret it at all. It's paid for itself many times over, and it is the only camera I could find that I could afford that gave me 60 frames and 50 frames a second at full 4K resolution. So that's the tool I use. I'd say if you're going to be doing a lot of filming, get yourself a decent camcorder. Get yourself a decent, don't bother with mirrorless and that stuff because it's going to cost you. You may be able to pick up a decent mirrorless camera or digital camera for $1,000. But then you're going to have to spend so much on lenses and filters and batteries, you might as well just buy a camcorder and get all in one very convenient package. And I'm not a brand snob, I'm brand agnostic. I mean, I started with Sony, I went to Panasonic, I went back to Sony, now I'm back to Panasonic. I just use whatever is the best value and the most effective at the time, and at the moment it's this thing, the HC-X1500. So in the next video I'm going to talk a bit about the technique of filming, how I use this camera to get the good footage you need to start in the whole chain of producing a good final result. It's all very well having the right tool, but you're going to know how to use it. And I'm going to focus on that in the next video. So if you like this video, if you think this is a valuable series, if you like making videos yourself, and the things I've said here also apply to things like sports. Anywhere you've got something that is doing a lot of movement and is a long way away, you need to pull it in, but you need to get stable footage. This is the kind of thing you want. This is going to give the results. So whether it's football, whether it's motocross racing, whether it's model aircraft, whether it's ice hockey, this is the kind of setup which can really do a good job. Now, I don't sell these, I don't have any affiliate links, I don't do that sort of rubbish. But so there's no commercial imperative. I don't care if you buy these. I'm not reviewing it as such, I'm just telling you why I use it. And you'll notice there's no mid-rolls in this video. I don't put mid-roll ads in my video. I don't take sponsorship, I don't solicit for anything. So if you'd like to support my freedom, my ability to bring you this stuff without you having to wade through all that commercial dross, you can go to my Patreon. There's a link in the description. Throw me $1 a month. Helps me make content. Helps me make content that hopefully you like. There you go. Thank you for watching, people. If you've got comments, bung them down below, and I'll do my best to answer them in the next video when I talk about how to use your video camera to get the best results. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.